Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. Coaches, the JAMODI podcast is powered by Shoot 360. The future of basketball has arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth. Shoot 360 combines the latest sports technology with the fundamentals of basketball skill development. The result is a one-of-a-kind video game-like basketball program designed to improve your shooting, dribbling, and passing. Visit shoot360dfw.com to learn more and register for your free 1-hour workout evaluation. Shoot 360, the future of basketball is here. So you have that dynamic culture. What's one of your ways to build that up? And is it not just daily, but maybe an activity that you do?
Absolutely. So actually, it's going to be next week. So first, what I actually do is I don't like to come in immediately and say, all right, this is our culture. I actually want the boys to kind of get a feeling for how we are as a staff and the environment that we're creating for them. So actually the first 3 weeks, I don't say anything, right? I let it play out. I learn, because we got a lot of new players. I get to know the kids. I see what they're really like. After 3 weeks, the honeymoon period is over. I start to see tantrums and things like that in practice, and I see you really get to know the players, right?
Yeah.
So now what we've done is we just created something called Team Pulse. So I'll get this up on my laptop so I can talk through it. So it's a Google Doc. So everything with our staff is on Google, and we basically assign with our coaching staff. We basically group all the players, and we give coaches like 3 or 4 players each. Their job of that coach, including head coach, is to basically like check in on those players during the year, and they're assigned to them. Then what we have, so we call it a pulse owner, right? So I'm like the pulse owner of 4 players. My assistant gets 4, and we all share it. And then we just make a note every week. And so for instance, right now we've got, for one player on our team pulse, struggling with his on-court role and effective play leading to frustration. KK, which is our assistant, Kareem, is going to start conversation weekly check-in. Then we just got on another player, Small Heart, needs a lot of touches. And another one, we need to figure out what he wants from himself. Seems a bit careless, not so interested in learning. Let's have a conversation with him. Mm-hmm. So it's like we got these little notes on every player. And then we have action steps for that with each player and kind of who's owning that. And then it's all color-coded. And then what we do is next week, we actually have, this is the first time we're doing it, off-court workshop with all the players. And we haven't actually introduced the values to them yet. So I haven't been speaking about them the first 3 weeks. So in this workshop, I basically get them doing a bunch of reflective tasks. And I ask them questions like, what's the worst culture you've been a part of and why? And it's really interesting just to hear how humble they are and what they say. And they do this in pairs. We call it debriefs. So they talk with a partner, and then I cold call on someone to use their leadership voice to explain this to the whole group, right? So again, this is all things like this, leadership voice, it's all linked into our culture of autonomy and, all of this. So then we quickly identify these things, and then we look at things like what type of environment it is that we want to be a part of. And this links into a lot of the stuff that Owen Eastwood has done. He's one of my favorite guys on culture because it's academic, his stuff. It's tangible and it's more evidence-based, right? It's
not just touchy-feely.
Not touchy-feely stuff. And Owen's worked with some of the best sports teams in the world, like the All Blacks rugby, South Africa cricket, English football team. So, and he actually talks about tangible ideas and how you can actually foster a sense of belonging in a group. And so it's a bunch of stuff where we share these ideas together. We talk about what type of environment we're striving to create. So we do all this reflective stuff. The guys feel like they're really part of the co-design, like they're designing this. It's not coming from top to bottom. It's more bottom up, right? So we do all these activities. I make it interactive. So I play like a 3-minute video of the All Blacks because I feel like that's the best case study of any team, any level getting it done, from a culture perspective.
Yeah.
And then we get onto the values. So then I introduce the values to the boys, and I get them to talk about what it means to them and kind of why we chose these values, how they think they can use these values in their day-to-day lives, not just basketball. And And that's kind of how we go about it. So it's very kind of interactive. And then kind of from that moment on, we can really link everything back to the values in everything we do.
The one thing I thought about early on with what you said there, again, the idea of highlighting maybe a deficiency that I have. I'm the guy that day one culture, day one,
Absolutely,
first
man.
word, let's get going. But I love the idea of taking time because there's other processes that we need to put in place too.
Oh,
How
yeah.
often are coaches guilty of trying to get everything done at once
So
instead
true.
of
And
slowing down? Because like I'm just thinking to myself, like in the future, what I'm going to do is let's take the first week on just how we how we stand, how we practice. What does double whistle mean? What does single whistle mean? How we look. But the beauty with your 3 weeks is I would imagine the players, without even knowing it, because of how you train them, because of how you
exactly.
interact with them, they're when they finally hear the culture pieces, they go, yeah, yeah, like we've been doing this, right? Like it lines up, and I think that's awesome.
And I gotta say too on this, man, like I loved what you said at the start about asking assistant coaches, like something I read in Culture Cult. That's also a good book because it's evidence based by Dan Coyle. He talks about like anytime you're in a new environment, just ask the people who are already there, like what's one great thing we should keep doing, and if you could change anything, what would that be? If you could change one thing, what would that be? So I think lots of things like that, and also just asking the players for feedback. Like I typically we have like a group WhatsApp chat. I'll typically be
Mm.
like, all right, send me any feedback that you have, anything we can do better as a program. Send me a private message. We'll get to it. Same with coaches. So I think it's like it's creating that environment of psychological safety where they know they can not just make mistakes in basketball, so anyone can say something, and they know that we're going to respect it and take a look at it. And I think the thing too, Matt, with culture is it's not easy and it's not like just all rosy. Like for instance, we've got two players on our team right now who are some of our biggest prospects, like could be high Division 1 players, but really struggling in practices with their attitude, their
Mm.
mentality, how they respond to mistakes, how they respond to feedback. And it's like you're not going to know every answer. Like, I've been tested quite a lot in the first 3 weeks, and I felt like I've really responded great sometimes. And other times, on a day where maybe I'm tired and I've got less energy, something else has gone on in my personal life and I haven't dealt with the situation like I wanted to. And I think it's like that's going to happen because we're humans,
Yeah.
right? And I
Yeah.
think it's like these things where you're tested, those are really good signs because it's how you can make the program better. So for instance, tomorrow I'm meeting all my staff and we're going to like talk about, these players and how we can actually respond and deal with them better. But I think it's not always going to be smooth sailing. There will be times when you're tested. And I think for coaches, we just have to look at that as a normality, especially, basketball is a complex system. We got people from so many different backgrounds. They're kids. We don't know what's going on in their personal
That's
lives.
right. That's right.
So we always have to have that in the back of our minds.
Thank you for sharing that because I know for myself, I breathed out a little bit. I would imagine a lot of coaches are because when you just listening to you and the processes that you have, how organized you sound, it sounds as if you've got it all figured out. And
Oh,
and a coach could listen is going like, well, I mean, I'm not him. Like I
no.
don't have those players to hear that you struggle with fighting for your culture every single day from yourself, but also from the players that you have a skill. I think that's reassuring. I love the idea of Ted Lasso is a show that's huge over
Oh, great
here.
show.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't know,
I've seen, yeah, great show.
but there's so much coaching gold in that. And immediately when you said you asked for feedback, I thought of the box, the comment box that the manager decorates and everything. But I how many coaches are terrified of asking those types of questions like you asked because when they give feedback, it's got to be dealt with. Like, what if it
Exactly.
highlights something that is
You're
already an
scared.
insecurity of yours that you're worried about? Mike Neighbors, the head women's coach at Arkansas,
Absolutely.
he told me he asked them about what their pet peeves are with coaches. What things don't you like? what things could, it's just along the same lines,
Really
but I
good.
think that takes a lot of security in us as
I agree.
coaches to ask those questions.
I agree. And that's where it all comes down to. If you're a transactional coach
Yeah.
and you talk about culture, but then you're punishing the guys on every mistake, making them sprint all the time, you're like, you don't let them have their say, you tell them how to do things every time. For me, you can't, it's a waste of time even using the word culture, because you're not going to be able to create any type of environment that's really conducive for young people. And it's like, I think the key thing, Matt, is like, I've spent a lot of time studying this stuff, and I'm lucky and I'm fortunate enough to be a professional coach where this is my job. So I dedicate a lot of hours trying to get better, but it's like, you're not always going to have all the answers. But I think as long as you have an open mind and you're willing to evaluate yourself and ask the question, what can I do to improve? How can I be more open-minded to incorporate these things and just create a more positive environment for young people? Then you're going to be good. If you have that mentality, you're going to be able to create a nice environment for your players.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately it goes back to your why. Like if your why is helping them to grow, you'll find a way. It's not always going to be perfect. If your why is accumulating wins, this idea of legacy, that I don't know at what point I figured out like my legacy really doesn't matter as far as how many wins or championships, because I think of my favorite coaches that I've had, and a few years after they retired, it didn't matter anymore, but the relationships will remain. And I think that's what you figured out so well.
Always. And that's it, man. Like people, the players we're dealing with, they're not going to remember. I love for them. And hopefully they remember our style of play, our dominoes, conceptual offense and views, but they're not really going to remember that stuff and the wins and all that compared to how they remember how I made them feel as a person, right? Yep. The other stuff, like, really, who cares? Are they going to remember when we won by 2 points on the 21st of September against Torino? No, they're going to remember how I made them feel for their 1, 2, or 3 years that they were with me, the kind of the personal skills that they developed they're going to take wherever they are in life. And I think that's what we've got to remember at the end of the day as coaches.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.